Fuel may be used to cool oil in gas turbine engines. True. Ram air may be used to cool oil in turbine engines. True. Oil picks up the most heat from which of the following turbine engine components? The turbine bearing. In an axial flow turbine engine, compressor bleed air is sometimes used to aid in cooling the turbine, vanes, blades, and bearings. The turbine bearings, inlet vanes, and blades operate in the hottest area of the engine. Even though the air in the compressor is somewhat hot, it is still cooler than the air in the turbine section. In a jet engine, which uses a fuel-oil heat exchanger, the oil temperature is controlled by a thermostatic valve that regulates the flow of oil through the heat exchanger. What is the purpose of the last chance oil filters? To filter the oil immediately before it enters the main bearings. Which of the following is a function of a fuel-oil heat exchanger on a turbojet engine? Increases the fuel temperature. As the oil is cooled, the fuel picks up the heat, which helps in combustion and helps prevent fuel blockage from fuel icing. The amount of that fuel can be heated is limited, so the fuel does not get too hot. In a reciprocating engine oil system, the temperature bulb senses oil temperature at a point after the oil has passed through the oil cooler. Why are fixed orifice nozzles used in the lubrication system of gas turbine engines? To provide a relatively constant oil flow to the main bearings at all engine speeds. What will happen to the return oil if the oil line between the scavenger pump and the oil cooler separates? The return oil will be pumped overboard. Since this oil is being pumped from the engine to the external oil cooler, the oil will be pumped overboard. The engine oil temperature regulator is usually located between which of the following on a dry sump reciprocating engine? The scavenger pump outlet and the oil storage tank. After making a welded repair to a pressurized type turbine engine oil tank, the tank should be pressure checked to not less than 5 psi, plus the maximum operating pressure of the tank. Possible failure-related ferrous metal particles in turbine engine oil cause an electrical indicating type magnetic chip detector to indicate their presence by bridging the gap between the detector center, the positive electrode, and the ground electrode. What would be the probable result if the oil system pressure relief valve should stick in the open position on a turbine engine? Insufficient lubrication. What is the primary purpose of the oil to fuel heat exchanger? To cool the oil. Low oil pressure can be detrimental to the internal engine components. However, high oil pressure should be limited to the engine manufacturer's recommendations. What is the source of most of the heat that is absorbed by the lubricating oil in the reciprocating engine? The pistons and cylinder walls. The oil system is the main contributor to the cooling of the pistons and the cylinder walls. Heat is carried away by the oil splashing on the underside of the pistons and the cylinder wall as the piston exposes the cylinder wall at top dead center. What type of oil system is usually found on turbine engines? Dry sump, pressure, and spray. What will be the result of operating an engine in extremely high temperatures using a lubricant recommended by the manufacturer for a much lower temperature? The oil pressure will be lower than normal. The oil pressure will be lower because the viscosity of the oil decreases at high temperatures. Most gas turbine engine oils are synthetic. True. A time in seconds required for exactly 60 cubic centimeters of oil to flow through an accurately calibrated orifice at specific temperature is recorded as a measurement of the oil's viscosity. Compared to reciprocating engine oils, the types of oils used in turbine engines have less tendency to produce lacquer or coke. The oil used in reciprocating engines has a relatively high viscosity due to large clearances and high operating temperatures. If all other requirements can be met, what type of oil should be used to achieve theoretically perfect engine lubrication? The thinnest oil that will stay in place and maintain a reasonable film strength. An ideal oil would be thin enough to flow freely in the engine and have enough load carrying capacity to prevent any metal-to-metal contact. In addition to lubricating, reducing friction between moving parts, engine oil performs what functions? It cools, it seals, it cleans, it prevents corrosion, and it cushions impact shock loads. As a general rule, the mixture setting on a reciprocating engine operating at or near takeoff power that provides the best cooling is full rich. The viscosity of a liquid is a measure of its resistance to flow. Which of the following factors helps determine the proper grade of oil to use in a particular engine? Positive introduction of oil to the bearings. If the grade or viscosity is too high, the bearings can be damaged before the oil reaches them, such as during startup. Specific gravity is a comparison of the weight of a substance to the weight of an equal volume of distilled water at a specific temperature. High tooth pressures and high rubbing velocities, such as occur with spur-type gears, require the use of an EP lubricant. These types of gears use extreme pressure EP lubricants. Manufacturers normally require turbine engine oil servicing within a short time after engine shutdown, primarily to prevent over-servicing. What type of oil do most engine manufacturers recommend for a new reciprocating engine break-in? Straight mineral oil. The type of oil pumps most commonly used on turbine engines are classified as positive displacement. A positive displacement pump is used which normally requires a relief valve. Which of these characteristics is desirable in turbine engine oil? A high flash point. High flash point is a very important characteristic of turbine oil because it keeps the solvents from evaporating from the oil. The valve assemblies of opposed reciprocating engines are lubricated by means of pressure system. Oil under pressure flows through the hydraulic lifters, through the pushrod holes, and into the rocker arms to lubricate the valve assemblies. What will result if an oil filter becomes completely blocked? Oil will flow at a normal rate through the system. The oil filter bypass will open and allow oil to flow around the filter, providing a normal, unfiltered oil flow. How are the piston pins of most aircraft engines lubricated? By oil which is sprayed or thrown by the master or connecting rods. A vent line connecting the oil supply tank and the engine in some dry sump engine installations permit the oil tank to be vented through a normal engine vent. The crankcase is vented to the ambient atmosphere. The oil tank and engine bearings cavities are both vented to either the engine or oil tank. What is the purpose of a check valve generally used in a dry sump lubrication system? To prevent the oil from the supply tank from seeping into the crankcase during inoperative periods. Where is the oil of a dry sump reciprocating engine exposed to the temperature control valve sensing unit? The oil cooler inlet. This valve, sometimes called the oil cooler bypass valve, is generally located in the oil cooler inlet. In a reciprocating engine, oil is directed from a pressure relief valve to the inlet side of the pressure pump. The excess oil exiting the relief valve is routed to the inlet side of the pressure pump. An engine lubrication system pressure relief valve is usually located between the pump and internal oil system. The primary source of oil contamination in a normally operating reciprocating engine is combustion deposits due to the combustion chamber blow-by, and oil migration on the cylinder walls. A drop in oil pressure may be caused by foreign material under the relief valve. The main oil filters strain the oil at which point in the system, just as it leaves the pressure pump. The oil is drawn into the pressure pump and then from the pump past the pressure regulating valve and into the main oil filter or strainer. Which type valve prevents oil from entering the main accessory case when the engine is not running? A check valve. If this question is referring to a dry sump system, then a check valve is used to prevent oil from collecting in the crankcase. An oil tank having a capacity of 5 gallons must have an expansion space of 2 quarts. Oil tank should have an expansion space of 10%. In this case, the capacity is 5 gallons, should have the expansion space of 2 quarts. As a general rule, a small amount of small, fuzzy particles of gray metallic paste on a turbine engine magnetic chip detector is considered to be the result of normal wear. Why is expansion space required in an engine oil supply tank? For the oil enlargement and collection of foam. As the oil flows and is pumped through the engine, it mixes with air, causing it to foam. The expansion space is to allow room for the foaming of the oil. Which of the following bearing types must be continuously lubricated by pressure oil? Plain bearing. From the following, identify the factor that has the least effect on the oil consumption of the specific engine. Mechanical efficiency. The engine RPM and the lubricant characteristics have a direct relationship to oil consumption, while the mechanical efficiency has nothing to do with it. How is the oil collected by the piston ring returned to the crankcase? Through holes drilled in the piston oil ring groove. The oil removed from the cylinder wall by the oil control ring flows through holes in the back of the piston ring groove. The oil control ring leaves the correct amount of oil on the cylinder walls and removes any excess. In which of the following situations would the oil cooler automatic bypass valve be open the greatest amount? Engine oil below normal operating temperature. There's no reason to cool cold oil, so it bypasses the oil cooler when it is below normal operating temperature. As an aid to cold weather starting, the oil dilution system thins the oil with gasoline. The basic oil pressure relief valve setting for a newly overhauled engine is made in the overhaul shop. Where's the oil temperature bulb located on a dry sump reciprocating engine? Oil inlet line. If a full flow oil filter is used on an aircraft engine and the filter becomes completely clogged, the bypass valve will open and the oil pump will supply unfiltered oil to the engine. Where are sludge chambers when used in aircraft engine lubrication systems usually located? In the crankshaft throws. Sludge chambers are located in the crankshaft throws and are only cleaned or replaced during overhaul. The purpose of the flow control valve in a reciprocating engine oil system is to direct oil through or around the oil cooler. What is the primary purpose of the hopper located in the oil supply tank of some dry sump engine installations? To reduce the time required to warm the oil to operating temperatures. The hopper tank warms the oil to operating temperatures more quickly. What determines the minimum particle size which will be excluded or filtered by a Kuno type, stacked disc edge filtration filter? The spacer thickness. The spacer between the filtering disc will determine the size of the particles that are filtered out. The pumping capacity of a scavenger pump in a dry sump aircraft engine's lubrication system is greater than the capacity of the oil supply pump. If an engine operates with a low oil pressure and a high oil temperature, the problem may be caused by a leaking oil dilution valve. Some aircraft are equipped with an oil dilution system that can add gasoline to the lubricating oil system. This system is normally used in cold weather to make a cold engine start easier by slightly thinning the oil. If the oil dilution valve leaks and causes the oil viscosity to thin during normal operation, the pilot sees lower oil pressure and higher than normal operating temperatures. According to federal aviation regulations, oil tank fillers on turbine engines must be marked with the word oil. According to 14 CFR 33.7, Section C, 5, all turbine oil filler caps must be marked with the word oil. In order to maintain a constant oil pressure as the clearance between the moving parts of an engine increases through normal wear, the supply pump outlet remains relatively constant at a given RPM, with less oil being returned to the pump inlet by the relief valve. Lube system last chance filters in turbine engines are usually cleaned during overhaul. In regard to using a turbine engine oil analysis program, which of the following is not true? Generally, an accurate trend forecast may be made after the engine's first oil sample analysis. If an oil pressure of a cold engine is higher than at normal operating temperatures, the engine's lubrication system is probably operating normally. Upon what quality or characteristic of a lubricating oil is its viscosity index based? Its rate of change in viscosity with temperature change. The viscosity index shows the difference of the viscosity of oil at two different temperatures. Lubricating oils with high viscosity index ratings are oils in which the viscosity does not vary much with temperature change. Oils with a high viscosity index have a small change in viscosity over a wide range of temperatures. Which of the following has the greatest effect on the viscosity of a lubricating oil? Temperature. What advantage do mineral-based lubricants have over vegetable oil-based lubricants when used in aircraft engines? Chemical stability. The chemical stability of a mineral-based oils make them highly superior to vegetable-based oils for use in aircraft engines. The recommended aircraft engine lubricants are mineral or synthetic based. What type of oil do most engine manufacturers recommend after new reciprocating engine break-in? Ashless disbursement oil. The ash is removed from the inside of the engine by putting a disbursement additive in the oil. The dispersant allows the ash to stay in suspension and circulate with the oil through the system. Because of the relatively high rate of oil flow that is needed for cooling, the oil is circulated rapidly. As it passes through the oil filter, the ash content is removed and thus not allowed to settle in the crankcase or oil tank. What unit in an aircraft engine lubrication system is adjusted to maintain the desired system pressure? Oil pressure relief valve. In all pressure lubricating systems with a positive displacement pump, a pressure relief valve limits the oil pressure valve to the predetermined pressure set by the manufacturer. The purpose of directing bleed air to the outer turbine case on some engines is to provide optimum turbine blade tip clearance by controlling thermal expansion. Some larger reciprocating engines use the compensating oil pressure relief valve to provide a high engine oil pressure when the oil is cold and automatically lower the oil pressure when the oil warms up. In order to relieve excessive pump pressure in an engine's internal oil system, most engines are equipped with a relief valve. Which of the following lubrication system components is never located between the pressure pump and the engine pressure system? A fuel line for oil dilution system. Cylinder walls are usually lubricated by splashed or sprayed oil. What is the primary purpose of changing aircraft engine lubricating oils at predetermined periods? The oil becomes contaminated with moisture, acids, and finely divided suspended solid particles. Why is an aircraft reciprocating engine oil tank on a dry sump lubrication system equipped with a vent line? To prevent pressure buildup in the oil tank. Excessive oil is prevented from accumulating on the cylinder walls of a reciprocating engine by oil control rings in the pistons. Oil control rings regulate the thickness of film of oil on the cylinder walls. In most turbine engine oil tanks, a slight pressurization of the tank is desired to ensure a positive flow of oil. True. A turbine engine dry sump lubrication system of a self-contained high-pressure design consists of pressure, breather, and scavenge subsystems. Under which of the following conditions is the oil cooler flow control valve open on a reciprocating engine? When the temperature of the oil returning from the engine is too low. The purpose of a relief valve installed in the tank venting system of a turbine engine oil tank is to prevent oil pump cavitation by maintaining a constant pressure on the oil pump inlet. If the oil in the oil cooler core and annular jacket becomes congealed, what unit prevents damage to the cooler? Surge protection valve. A surge protection valve protects the oil cooler from rupture if the oil in the core of the cooler congeals during cold temperatures. The valve opens, allowing oil to flow around the core through an annular jacket of the oil cooler. As this oil, which at engine operating temperature flows, it warms the oil in the core so it can flow normally within the system. The purpose of a dwell chamber in the turbine engine oil tank is to provide separation of entrained air from scavenged oil. What are the most important properties an aircraft reciprocating engine oil must possess? Proper viscosity at operating temperature, ability to withstand the operational loads, rotational speeds, and reduce friction between engine parts. What bearing is the most critical in a turbine engine? The exhaust turbine bearing is the most critical for lubrication and cooling. What valve directs oil through or around the oil cooler to maintain the oil temperature within the operating limits? The oil cooler bypass valve. Where are oil screens usually located in a system? In the oil pressure system and scavenge system if there is one. What are common oil contaminants? Gasoline, moisture, acids, dirt, carbon, and metal particles. What is the purpose of the oil pressure relief valve in an engine-driven oil pump? The oil pressure relief valve controls the oil pressure in a gear-type pump. What actions must be done to inspect a cartridge-type oil filter? To inspect the filtering element, the can must be opened and the filter element removed and inspected.